Kirk and Julie have been great members of this community for a long time, predating Kevin and my arrival here. He's been a pillar of professionalism and production at the position. In these last couple of years, we've got a lot of great memories here, one of them being a division title ball that I looked at before I walked down here. He deserves a lot of credit for that, and we'll always appreciate Kirk and thank him for that. These decisions are never easy.
Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, GM of the Vikings, talking about the decision of Kirk Cousins to move on from the Vikings, fueled by, at some level, the decision of the Vikings not to put the kind of offer on the table that the Falcons did. Now, and there's a little more on the front end of that shows Kevin O'Connell going from looking straight ahead to, as soon as Kwesi Adofo-Mensah starts talking about Kirk Cousins, kind of looks down, kind of does this just a little bit and starts. And I want to be fair to Kevin O'Connell. I think that's just like what he always does. If you watch the whole press conference, when he's not talking, he looks down. And, what do I do? Do I just sit here like this, like Cindy Brady with the red light on while the other guy's talking? That's just what he does. And somebody needs to tell him, under certain circumstances, there may be some jerks out there, like that guy that runs PFT, who will see that and say, aha, bad body language, aha, there's a dispute, aha. But it did strike me, it caught my attention, and whoever was working the thing in the control room goes to the one shot of Kwesi. Smart move there. But I did notice, in full and complete fairness, I just think that's what Kevin O'Connell does when he's not talking at a press conference featuring more than one person. So they're selling a united front. And the only reason that I questioned earlier this week, and I have a feeling that some of the people in the organization aren't happy with me in the aftermath of it, but I have to always tell my truth, the truth as I see it, to the audience. When you've got Kevin O'Connell saying, I 100% unequivocally want Kirk Cousins back, and he's not back, you got to wonder what happened. What happened when the head coach wants him back? Did the head coach change his mind? Did the head coach want him back at a certain price? Was the head coach being tactful when he talked about it? And did the head coach not want to potentially damage his relationship with Kirk Cousins by saying, I want him back, but there's a limit to how much I think we should pay? We don't know. But they're fair questions to ask, and the questions that came up yesterday. Fair to ask, proper to answer, and Kwesi Adofo-Mensah said what, needed to be said. And we may never find out whether or not they're all on the same page. But my point was, in raising it, we need to watch what happens going forward. And we'll make the assessment of whether or not they're on the same page based upon what they do and how they do it going forward.
Yeah, Mike, I think I'm going to start doing that to you when you talk. I think that's a pretty good tactic by Kevin O'Connell. But to me, it was a little bit telling, Mike, even if he does that all the time, that he just didn't look up, and it came across as that, certainly, that he didn't like what transpired. And they have said all along, and Kevin O'Connell said it at the scouting combine, that they had contingency plans. We're going to see what those contingency plans are, because they now have to be put in place. But I understand Kirk Cousins wasn't that successful in the postseason, but he's still one of the better quarterbacks in the NFL. And when he left Washington in 2018, Mike, that team has not been the same. 10 starters at quarterback since then. They'll have an 11th this season. So you better beware that getting rid of Kirk Cousins doesn't always work out the way maybe that you had planned it. You didn't want to spend the money, but now you have to find another quarterback, and you're not going to win unless you have a quarterback in this league. And who that's going to be remains to be seen. They say they have contingency plans in place. Let's see what those are. But they're not going to have Kirk Cousins, and so they've got to have somebody at least as good, Mike, to contend in that division. We just talked about how good potentially that division could be this season.
Layers of contingency plans is what the statement from Kwesi Adofo-Mensah said on Monday. The statement they had ready to go when it became known that Kirk Cousins was moving on. This is not the same thing as getting yourself dressed for the winter elements in Minnesota. Layers can be a bad thing because if you don't get plan A, what's plan B? Oh, wait, we have plan C. Well, we have plan D. We have plan E. We have layers of plans. The problem is plan C, D, E, F, and G are there for a reason. You don't want to get down to those layers. This is like invading the layers of the epidermis with a needle or a knife or a rusty nail. You don't want to do that. You want to get to the top layer and be done with it. So anyway, here's more from Kwesi Adofo-Mensah and Kevin O'Connell yesterday on the question of whether everyone in the building was in alignment on their plan for Kirk Cousins.
There was complete alignment, with how not only, going into the process, but how everything played out from a standpoint of our plan for Kirk. Everybody knows how myself, Kwesi, this organization feels about Kirk. And, sometimes things just don't work out. And I think the most important thing is that alignment and the understanding that our plans in place. Kwesi's used the word contingency plans, but those are all discussions and paths and avenues we can take at a very, very important position, no doubt. But in the end, as much as I would have maybe liked to have Kirk here, the right thing moving forward for our team is where we are today.
There was complete alignment. This sport isn't such where you can just say on a binary basis, I want that player. I think we've been very clear since we've gotten here that we like Kirk Cousins. We've been very clear that we think we could win Super Bowl with Kirk Cousins. But that we have a sport that only gives you a certain number of draft picks, a salary cap, competition versus other teams. It's a resource-constrained thing.
There was a moment during that press conference as well where Kwesi Adofo-Mensah talks about the increase in the salary cap and the reaction to that when they found out 3 weeks ago today that the cap was going up to $255.4 million per team. And he said Kevin O'Connell rushed in. This is found money. And it almost, when you understand the context, like, hey, we can offer Kirk more now. That was not that he said that, but the bottom line is everybody's got that. That's what Kwesi's response was. It's everybody. It's not just us. So resources are constrained, but the resources are equivalent. And at the end of the day, they got past the point where they were willing to go. I'm still trying to get the Vikings' last best offer to Kirk Cousins. I have been unable to get it. And as Chris Sims said earlier this week, the longer it goes without knowing what the Vikings offered, the more likely it was an offer that was designed to be respectful but not accepted. Enough that it doesn't look like they're lowballing him or making him an offer they know he'll never accept. Something that's plausible, but something that's not going to be competitive with what the Falcons did. And in the absence of any leak, any information, anything along those lines that would shed light on it, I'm going to believe that it was an offer that they hoped he would not take. It makes me think of Ben Roethlisberger's last year in Pittsburgh. They made him an offer that they thought he wouldn't take, and he took it. And they're like, oh, what do we do now? We thought we were moving on from Ben Roethlisberger this year. So I think the Vikings, in a weird sort of way, are getting what they wanted. And Charean, I get your point about what Washington has been post-Kirk Cousins. I think from the Vikings' perspective, we got to think about what they've been with Kirk Cousins. And this is tough for me because I came around last year after the Monday night win over the 49ers when Kirk Cousins played arguably the best game of his career. And I thought, okay, they need to keep this guy and see what the remainder of his career can be. They've got 6 years in. Let's see. They've already paid the dues for 6 years as he keeps possibly moving toward a higher and higher level relative to the other quarterbacks. Let's see. Let's not let it happen somewhere else. And that said, 1 playoff win in 6 years. 2 playoff appearances in 6 years. A guy who proudly says he doesn't work on Tuesdays during football season. Proudly. Defiantly. And I have a feeling that's going to change in Atlanta. I have a feeling that's just going to quietly shift, and he's going to understand I need to be all in if I'm going to get the most out of my abilities in the years that I have left playing football. And this is a criticism I had for the Vikings in the final years of Mike Zimmer's regime. Some would say that the criticism got Mike Zimmer fired. I wouldn't say that, but some believe that, including Mike Zimmer. I digress. For the Vikings, is it just good enough to be just good enough? And I think a lot of teams have to ask themselves that question. Are we content to be on the fringes of contention every year? We're alive past Thanksgiving. We're in it in December. Some years we get to the playoffs, some years we don't. And the years we get there, we're really not going to compete with the best teams in the conference. It's just a question of whether we exit in the wild card round or the divisional round. Like, I felt like the Vikings were just kind of happy to do that every year. And this move, wherever it leads, wherever it goes, I think their intent is to get a quarterback that allows them to be that team that the other teams have to worry about. Whether it works or not, I don't know, but I feel like that's why they did what they did.
Well, Mike, we heard the quote. We've been very clear that we think we could win a Super Bowl with Kirk Cousins. That's not true, because if you thought that you could win a Super Bowl with Kirk Cousins, you go out and you pay him whatever it takes to keep him. If that was the true belief, that's what you do. But we have no evidence that Kirk Cousins can win in the postseason. 0-1 in Washington in the playoffs, Mike, as you said, 1-2 in the postseason with 2 postseason appearances with Minnesota. This is not a guy who has been successful in the postseason. So they're going to draft, I would presume, a rookie quarterback, whether Sam Darnold starts this year or the rookie starts and Sam Darnold's the bridge quarterback, however that works out. But you get that rookie contract. And the way it works now, Mike, in the past, remember when you had that number 1 overall pick, was paid all that money and you're stuck with him. If you don't make the right pick, you're doomed. Well, now you draft a quarterback in the first round. He doesn't work out. Hey, you draft another one a year or 2 later and you start over again, but you can do it very quickly. You don't have to wait for that contract. You can just move on, say, this is not going to work out. Let's find a different quarterback. And there's so many more now veteran quarterbacks available, good veteran quarterbacks available each and every year of free agency or through a trade or whatever it is. You can get a guy. So they do have an opportunity to draft a quarterback, build around him because he's going to be on that rookie contract. Let Sam Darnold start. If he's not ready to start day one, start out the season with Sam Darnold. Could be a little bit of a rebuild to start this year, but if they pick the right quarterback, if they get that opportunity, obviously the top quarterbacks are going to be gone depending on if they trade up and how far they can trade up and all those sorts of things. But they could end up, Mike, with a quarterback in the first round who can be that guy, who can get them to where they haven't been with Kirk Cousins. And so if that works out, then this was a great move. If it doesn't, and they draft that guy, they're probably not going to be there. This GM and coach probably aren't going to be there very long because you have to get it right. And you do have to get it right fairly quickly because you don't get many opportunities to get that right before the owner moves on and says, I'm going to find somebody else who can get the quarterback position right for me.
And when you consider the Vikings are at number 11 this year,
Yep.
and that the best of the best quarterbacks likely will be gone, brings me back to one of my favorite offseason themes, Tank Club. First rule of Tank Club is don't talk about Tank Club. The dirty little secret that all those wins that didn't make a damn bit of difference, that didn't get you to the playoffs, all they did was get you in a tougher spot to replace Kirk Cousins. Yeah, it was exciting while it lasted. And yeah, there was a moment where it felt like the Vikings could be competitive at a high level last year. And yeah, hey, up until the Kirk Cousins blowing out his Achilles tendon at Lambeau Field, they looked better than they were in 2022 when they went 13-4 and were winning all those games by a razor-thin margin. And then after Kirk Cousins, Kevin O'Connell taking average to below average quarterbacks and getting them to play at a high level. 400 yards from Nick Mullins. Are you kidding me? That's more impressive than what he did with Josh Dobbs. The problem is you're now at number 11. When are you ever going to get the franchise quarterback? You have to either know that one of the guys that slips through the early cracks is truly special, like Andy Reid did with Patrick Mahomes, who fell to number 10 and would have been taken by Sean Payton at number 11 if Andy Reid hadn't traded up. You either need to get lucky that way, or you just need to bottom out one year and hope that it doesn't get everybody fired. Hope that the aftermath of 3-14 doesn't get everyone a pink slip and a thank you on social media. So how does that happen? It's not easy to pull it off. They're going to have their chance this year. One of the guys that we all think is second tier, if they think he's first tier, and they have to be dispassionate in their analysis, because if you're too desperate, you get Christian Ponder. All due respect to Christian Ponder, but that's what happened in 2011. When teams had quarterback needs, there was no free agency because of the lockout. So in the draft, Jake Locker 8, Blaine Gabbert 10. Both teams in the AFC South taking quarterbacks when J.J. Watt was still on the board to the Texans at 11. And then the Vikings take Christian Ponder at 12. Quarterbacks get overdrafted by teams who are desperate for quarterbacks. Hi, it's Mike Florio. Thanks for watching PFT on YouTube. Hit subscribe for the latest news and analysis from Pro Football Talk.